How do you go from this to this? We're going to show you how. Sometimes the bolts you have to use are in pretty rough shape, and particularly I'm talking about more aesthetic bolts. Think around fenders, hoods, door jambs, door hinges, things like that on vehicles, and many times they are painted fasteners that have then had sockets or wrenches put on them, and the paint is flaked off, or you try to paint them black, paint them gray, paint them cast, and then as you put them on, you crack the paint on them, or the next time you put a wrench on them, you crack the paint. So what other options are there? Well, there's actually a couple. Let's get started. So we've got several bolts here, several fasteners. We've even got some screws here, and this process will really work on any fastener and other things as well, which we will show you. And we're going to use 4 different types of oil in this process, as you can see behind us. We'll explain that here in a moment. Now I've seen this process mistakenly named black oxide coating. We're really not putting a coating on these fasteners. We're actually trying to treat the metal that will protect this from time to come from things like rust, but it's not going to prevent it forever. It will be a preventative for probably several years, arguably decades, depending on how clean you get it, how well you penetrate it, things like that. But bottom line is it makes it much more aesthetically pleasing than what you're seeing here. And just to explain, like, this is a black oxide coated tap, and it's actually a coating on here. We're not going to coat this. What we will be doing is more of kind of a metal or steel treatment, and you'll find that out here in just one moment. So what we're going to do first is we need to clean up all the areas that we're actually going to be treating on these fasteners. So pretty simple. Put these things on a wire wheel, get them cleaned up. You could put them in a blasting cabinet or a sand blaster and blast them if you wanted to. Things like zinc coated nuts and bolts or galvanized nuts and bolts, you'll definitely need to either soak those in vinegar, overnight or a couple of days, or something in muriatic acid for a few minutes and then clean them up. But regardless, or you could put them on a sander or a wire wheel and get it off that way as well, or again, another blasting cabinet. But bottom line is, even if they're clean and they're zinc coated or galvanized, they still need to be, that coating needs to be removed before this process will work. Now, this will work on stainless fasteners, we think. We will find that out here in a moment. And we've got a trick up our sleeve that's different from just the oils you're seeing here as well. Let's get started, clean these up, and then we'll get to heat treating. Now, we're not going to show too much of the cleanup. I think you probably get how this works. Basically, turn the wire wheel on and get to work on those fasteners. So we've got our fasteners all cleaned up with the wire wheel, nice and polished looking, and they'll probably stay that way for about 5 minutes here in the Central Florida humidity. Anyway, so we need to get something on these, whether it's paint, whether it's some type of coating, but obviously today we're going to do some treatment here. So what we have in the jugs behind here is the first one is actually just a motor oil. So good old Mobil 1. 5W30 as it says. Little high mileage triple action synthetic, only the best. This one here, a little better motor oil because it's actually used motor oil. Looks a little thin actually. Then we have linseed oil, and not just linseed oil, but boiled linseed oil, which, by the way, you can use either. They say that each have a different color effect to the steel, to the metal. So pretty cool. Hopefully we'll get more of a bronze looking coat on that one. Not a coat, sorry, but more of a bronze looking finish on it when we finish. And then regular old vegetable oil. So we're going to see how each of these turn out. All right, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to get these things hot. Now, the key is we don't want to get them too hot. If you're getting them glowing red, you're actually changing the structure of the fastener. Now, I do not recommend using any fasteners that are, critical fasteners. In other words, fasteners that need to be, for torquing down cylinder heads or crank bolts or anything like that. This is more aesthetic looking bolts, fenders, hoods, things like that you shouldn't really hurt even if you did get it glowing red, but I highly recommend don't get it glowing red. We'll show you here how to work this. So we're going to take a propane torch, and then we're actually going to use something different, but I'll show you with common tools like a propane torch right here. So this is just regular old propane with the old Bernzomatic TS8000 torch tip. So we're going to get this hot. And by the way, I couldn't get it glowing red with this propane torch probably anyway. It'd take a long time. And you see it darkening up right now. So we want to darken up, and then it will actually turn lighter again as well. So it's turning a nice blue, dark. And then it will lighten up again as we see it happening right now before it starts turning a glowing red. Bigger the fastener, the longer it's going to take. It's like I'm torching my wooden stand. And by the way, an acetylene torch would do this a lot quicker. And just so you know, where we're wanting to get to is about 500 degrees. So I passed that up. So we're actually good right now. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to use the motor oil. It's got a decent hue to it already. So we're going to say a single dip, and let's see how well that does. We're going to let that sit there. And actually a step I forgot is we really should degrease all these after we've cleaned them on the wire wheel. Now, I doubt there is any grease on these after wire wheeling them, but still take you some brake cleaner or some type of degreaser. You can put it on a rag if you want to. I'm just going to spray it on. It should evaporate pretty quick. And just make sure there's no fingerprints on there. And that will aid in this process. And to speed things up now, I'm going to use my induction heater, this mini ductor Venom, to heat up this bolt now. And we'll see the transformation happen a lot quicker. So now pull the trigger on this. And so anything inside that coil that is a ferrous metal will start heating up. Well, actually, any type of steel will start heating up. And we see what's happening right now is that washer is heating up. You see it already turning blue. And you see the whole thing turning blue now. Now starting to turn white. And that's probably where we need to be. Yeah, so we're right at 500 degrees there. So now we'll take this and quench it in the used motor oil. See, it's taking a very blue finish on that one. Lay that one aside, and let's get started on the next one. Now this one was a pretty corroded up bolt and should go rather quickly. See it already turning bronze and now black, now blue, now almost white. And again, let's check the temp there. 450. Yeah, so let's hit that just a little bit longer. Actually, 400 is probably absolutely fine. And now we have the linseed oil. Very gray finish, it looks like. Lay that one aside. Very blue. Plenty hot enough. And regular vegetable oil. And then a question I had was that if another option would work, which by the way, we really got two more options we're going to show you here. But first, let's try this one here. Again, that washer getting hot first. Not quite where we want to be yet. But the question is, can we take WD-40? I think you'd probably want to quench it. It is turning a little bit of a color, but it's really not giving it a very nice finish as to some of the others. But again, maybe if you actually quenched it in WD, yeah, it'd probably work if you quenched it. And now watch what happens here. So now we have a bolt here that obviously is very clean. In fact, I'm going to make sure it's clean for this next process. So same process, going to heat this up. Very bronze, very blue. Brass brush, solid brass brush. Continue to brush. You see what's happening here. So basically, the melting point of brass is lower than the melting point of steel. And so we're basically brazing brass on to this head bolt. It's just a tiny fractional layer of brass that's melting on to that head bolt. Or not to that head bolt, to the head of that bolt. That's a pretty cool process right there. So you are putting a layer of brass, almost like you're brazing it on there, by just brushing it on lightly. And it gives a nice satin finish of the brass on the head of that bolt. Be careful you don't melt your brush as we're doing, all the things are coming out, because I think it's basically heating up the plastic of the handle. Now we're going to do one really quick for the WD-40 again and quench it. And so let's heat up this bolt really quick. Got a little cap full of WD-40 there. Looks like we have melted our lid with hot oil. And this process doesn't just work for fasteners. So you can see the brass effect coating that steel. And the same is true even on some tubing. Oops. Okay, first, the brass coating is just a really cool effect. Did better on the bolt than on the steel. I don't know if I didn't get it hot enough or whatever, but I can see some fluctuation in the brass coating here on the flat part, but you can definitely be careful and coat your steel flat surface as well, or even a round surface. So I really like the brass effect, even on like stainless fasteners, and even like socket head screws. Even on rounded head screws look good. So if that was on a motorcycle or something like that, again, I could have taken a little better care of getting that on proper, but it could be a really good looking detail. But let's take a look at these coatings. So this is still a little warm. And let's just wipe this off. So we get a real, which this was linseed oil, dipped in linseed oil, and we melted our little container there. Ow, it's still really hot. Anyway, so pretty dark effect on that steel tubing. This is the first, well, no, this was the last bolt we did in that series because it was vegetable oil. Wipe that off nice and clean. And it gives a really sheen, looks very dark. Don't really see any bronze, just more of a black or a dark gray with the vegetable oil. And the linseed, again, giving a very dark gray effect. Almost a blue, but really not any bronze. I was expecting to see kind of that dark tea color, but it's more of a dark gray than anything else. This one here was the used motor oil. And that really looks good. That's that's kind of a dark blue. That's more of a bluing than anything else, almost like a gun blue on that color there. I really like that. One thing you do need to realize is, like, inside that head, of course, when we go down and try to submerge it, it's probably got an air pocket there because the color is a little different there. So if you were going to do that, you may want to drop it in there or somehow turn it sideways so the oil could get there as well, because again, it looks a little bit different color, more of a brownish right inside that head, but on the sides here, very blue looking effect, dark blue. And then here on the clean motor oil. Clean motor oil is more of a bronze. Of course, that could be dependent upon which motor oil you use. But again, that's more on the bronze brown side than it is the blue or the black, but still gives it a nice appearance on the head of that bolt. And then finally, this was the WD-40 that we actually submerged, and that looks really good, actually. Again, same thing here. We probably had an air pocket here. Of course, we were dipping in that cap as well before it melted. But that's actually a pretty good look to it. So make sure you have a big enough container that it doesn't overheat and actually melt your container. And you may want to use more of a Tupperware or something like that. But again, the more fluid, the more it will stay cooler and not melt the plastic. But just a really cool effect that you can do with common shop materials. Most people have oil, either vegetable oil, motor oil, used motor oil, boiled linseed oil, but really it looks like you don't really have to buy anything. If you're going to do the brass effect, you have to have a solid brass or a true brass brush, not a brass coated brush. A lot of your brass brushes are steel brushes, just brass coated. It needs to be a solid brass so that it kind of brazes on there or kind of melts as you brush it on. This one just did a really good job. Still a little warm. And I probably could have done a better job on the flats, but on the top just gives a really good look. I think that's what we built our building out of. Anyway, cool effect on that brass stuff. I have to say that my favorite is the brass. However, that's not going to look good on everything. It definitely sticks out like a sore thumb. So if you're wanting to accent the fasteners, then definitely the brass is the way to go if you like that. But if you're just wanting it to look good, I like really all of these, and they have some different hues to them. So you can play with different oils to get different hues. Got it real black on this one after a couple of treatments. And will it come off? Yes, you can really, you can take a wire wheel and get this off. But it's not really so much a coating as it is just kind of impregnated with that burnt oil. So it will come off over time, but it should be a rust preventative for years to come, some say even decades. So, if it's under the hood and not outside the vehicle, then it will probably last for many, many years. But anyway, check it out. Easy process to do with materials you typically have around the shop. Anyway, keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and even TikTok. And hey, if you don't mind, would you hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already? And by all means, if you hated our video, well, give us a thumbs down. But would you let us know in the comments why? Have a great day. Keep smiling.